Few have lived the life of one Alexander Selkirk, a man of simple origins, from the family of a cobbler in Fife, Scotland. Since his death, his stories inspired many tales of survival and has inspired many after him. From a troubled and rebellious kid, to pirate, to sailing master, to castaway, to master of ship, to pirate hunter. Relive the story of this incredible life and Alexander Selkirk's extraordinary story. Born in 1676, he was the son of a shoemaker along with 6 other brothers. He was a problem child, often getting into trouble. He once fought with his own brother after he was tricked into drinking seawater by his brother. This incident and reports of him misbehaving on various occasions at church led to a formal summoning of appearing before the Kirk session, which in its time was a court dealing with religious matters. However, it was only for him not to appear. He had escaped to sea, making a life for himself as a buccaneer, which was a legal form of piracy under the British rule. He sought to raid and ruin French and Spanish interests and resources around the seas of the Pacific and Atlantic seas. In 1703 he enlisted in the service of William Dampier, the world-famous English explorer who explored large areas of Australia and was the first to circumnavigate the world 3 times over. Alexander's experience in the seas, personal traits and reported expertise of maths and navigation earned him the role of sailing master aboard the ship Cinque Ports, estimated to carry 60 men, and was a 16-gun ship. This accompanied and followed the bigger and bolder St. George, captained by William Dampier himself, a ship able to carry over 120 men and showing off with its 26 cannons. In 1703 both ships left Ireland heading west with the intention to raid and loot Spanish treasures aboard their galleons. After many weeks at sea, disaster struck. Poor diet and hygiene led to outbreaks like scurvy, which crippled the expedition, resulting in the death of many, even the captain of Cinque Ports, the ship where Selkirk himself travelled. This led to the ship falling under the captaincy of the inexperienced 21-year-old Thomas Stradling. Though they captured some treasure, luck continued to elude them. Harsh conditions at sea and infestations of worms of the ship's hull greatly diminished the hull, and Selkirk openly voiced his concerns. Finding a place to make repairs and restock on much needed supplies, Stradling ordered the men to stop at the inhabited island of Juan Fernandez, found today near Chile. Selkirk grew angry with the inexperienced Stradling, and multiple sources note that Stradling was a poor buccaneer with questionable tactics. Sterling feared that the ship would not last much longer, and neither would its crew. Following an argument with the new captain, Selkirk chose to remain on the island, not risking his life anymore, and wait to be rescued, which eventually never came, while Cinque Ports left along with its crew. However, time had proved Alexander Selkirk wise. Some while later the ship itself eventually sank, killing many, and the survivors, including Stradling himself and some of the crew, were handed over to the Spanish. Stranded on the Masalatira island, with only some clothing, bedding, musket and powder, tools and tobacco and a Bible, he was a castaway for over 4 years and 4 months. In the first few weeks, Selkirk waited his rescue, reading his Bible and living off the land, but as time passed on, he realized the severity of the situation. As a food source, he used the seas to catch fish and lobster, and using the island fauna such as another source. Earlier visits by other sailors meant that wildlife began to grow, such as goats or rats, which he also used as a food source, the goats providing both milk and meat. Also, the island grew turnips and cabbages, providing some very much needed roughage in his diet. Once the gunpowder in his musket began to dwindle, he fashioned a blade out of the metal hoops of barrels swept up the shore. His experience as the son of a tanner proved him useful, as he was able to fashion clothes from the skin of the goat. During this time, the island was visited twice by the Spanish, but if he was seen, this would result in immediate capture or death. so instead he decided to hide, which meant that ultimately he would have to stay on the island for longer. During one of the visits by the Spanish, it is reported he was so close to capture that whilst hiding in the tree on the island, one of the Spanish sailors urinated behind the tree he was hiding in. After 4 years and 4 months, a party of privateers landed ashore, only to find Alexander dressed in goatskins. This landing party consisted of a number of sailors, which was then led by privateer Thomas Dover, who later became famous for introducing an opium-based cure for the common cold called Dover's powder. Alexander Selkirk was taken aboard their ship, the Duke, only to realise the ship was carrying a familiar face, William Dampier, his previous employer. From him he had learned the fate of the doomed Cinque Ports. The ship was captained by the famous and most notorious pirate hunter Woodes Rogers, who deserves his own episode of extraordinary stories by right. Aboard the Duke he gave a great impression, and after some time aboard he became second mate of the very ship that rescued him. He returned to privateering with great success under the command of Rogers, capturing a Spanish galleon which was then offered to Thomas Dover to captain. On this ship Alexander became sailing master once more and travelled an around the globe trip abroad. When Selkirk and Rogers both returned to England, they both reached instant fame and managed to preserve their memoirs in the written form, and Selkirk returned to see his family once more, who had long thought he had died. However, Selkirk was not around for too long, causing trouble once more and being charged with assault. After a few years he once more took to the sea, serving as master's mate aboard the HMS Weymouth on a pirate hunting mission on the west of Africa. However, this journey would be his last. He died aboard this ship. According to the log of the ship, Selkirk, then 45, died of yellow fever on 13th of December 1721 and was buried at sea. His legacy had a great impact on literature, inspiring a number of books and works, the most prominent being Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe, a fictional story heavily inspired on the story and life of Alexander, and thus preserving a part of Alexander's legacy. All these years later, archaeologists have visited the island which Alexander was stranded on, finding a gunpowder magazine, a pair of navigational dividers, and the suggestion that there may have been shelters constructed by him himself. As some of the research concludes, post holes suggest he built 2 shelters near to a freshwater stream and had access to a viewpoint over the harbour from where he would be able to watch for approaching ship and ascertain whether they were friend or foe. As of today, the island he inhabited was renamed the Robinson Crusoe Island after the story he helped inspire, and so his legacy remains. However, you may be wondering, as for Captain Stradling, the one who marooned him on the island, not much is known about the fate of the young Captain Stradling. After his capture by the Spanish, after his ship was wrecked, he was rescued by a Spanish priest who discovered his true identity and then was passed on to the Spanish authorities. His constant escape attempts led to the Spanish passing him to the custody of the French, where he continued to try and escape, even fabricating stories of a hidden treasure and asking for his release in exchange for the secret location. However, he eventually escaped his capture by tying bedsheets together and escaping back to Jersey in England. After this, not much is known of him. Alexander Selkirk's story is one of survival, courage, luck, and struggle. He inspired many, from sailors to writers, and his story is always one worth of being retold, and that is why this is an extraordinary story.